This is Yvette of Yvette Creates, and I'm part of the Not Too Shabby Shop design team. Today I'm going to be making half a sheet load of cards, and I'm going to be using a beautiful pattern paper from the Boho Autumn Paper Pack, and this is part of the Paper Pad Club for September 2025. And I'm also going to use this adorable little image from the Critter Café add-on stamp set. Now this stamp set you could get if you got the I Want It All bundle for the Paper Pad Club. This was a freebie stamp set for the I Want It All bundle. Now I did go ahead and prepare all my pieces for my cards today. So let me show you what I did. Now I will be sure to link to the Not Too Shabby Shop in the description box below, so that you can take a peek at all the fun goodies in the shop. So what I decided to do, because this month's sheet load, and let me kind of show you, this month's sheet load, it calls for 12 by 12 paper. So because the papers I'm using is 6 by 6 paper, I kind of adapted it a bit to work with our 6 by 6 paper. So I am using white card bases, and then I pulled in this embossed, it's a textured cardstock. It has kind of like a wood grain texture to it. And then I kind of went over it with some of my ink I have in my stash, just lightly went over it to give it more of a textured feel and look to it. I don't know if you can tell on there. But I did that. And then I stamped and colored this cute little image from that freebie add-on stamp set. Isn't he just adorable? And what I did, let me kind of show you. I stamped a mask, and when I stamp masks, I'll save them in the stamp set so I can use them later, as long as they're still usable. And I stamped the mask and masked over that image so that I could then stamp some of the leaves around the bottom of that little image, so it didn't look like he was just standing in the middle of nowhere. So then I did go ahead and color him in, and then I cut it out using this wonky stitched oval die that I had in my stash. I did stamp and cut the sentiment that says "Made with Love and Caffeine." Oh, and some of these leaves, a couple of these leaves were from that add-on image, but like this little acorn and some of the other leaves were from the other stamp set that you can get if you get the I Want It All bundle. And that other one is, it's the Critter Café stamp set. Let me get that, show it to you. It's this one. So I used these two little maple leaves and that little acorn on at least one of the cards, or one of the ovals. Then the paper I used, let me pull that out. I used, where is that? Let me find it. I didn't want to take up too much of your time. So this is the one I used. Now I chose that one because it had a smaller print, and because I was cutting this into smaller triangles here, I wanted you to be able to see the print. And then another thing I did to change up the sketch. So on the sketch, it calls for one pattern paper back here, and then this second pattern paper here in these two triangles. But instead of that pattern paper here, that's where I use this textured cardstock. And then here I changed the size of the triangles. So instead of cutting that piece of pattern paper, I think the sketch calls for it to be at 2 3/4 by 2 3/4. I cut it at 3 by 3. So I was able to get 4 pieces. And then you cut it at the diagonal. And then I cut the matte layers out of some brown textured cardstock I had as well. And then I'll just mat those on there and attach them to my gray cardstock here. So let me kind of put my cards together. I'll do that while I play a little bit of music, and then I'll meet you on the other end. Oh, one more thing I wanted to mention. I did cut the matte layer to have the same border as it calls for on the sketch, but because I cut the pattern paper a little bit larger, when I laid these out, let me show you, the matte layers meet here on the panel. So there's no space in between like there is on the sketch. Let me show you the sketch again. See how there's that space in between? Because I cut this larger, or I cut the pattern paper larger, which in turn made me have to cut the matte layer larger, there's no space there. So what I'm going to do is just kind of make it a smaller border for that matte layer so that I can push this back a little bit so there'll still be a little bit of space in between there. Alrighty, let's get this cards put together. Alrighty, friends, here are my 4 completed cards, and they're pretty much identical, other than I did have to use a different color of enamel dots here because I ran out of this beautiful green, but I think that color looks okay. But I think they turned out great, don't you? And I'm glad I chose to use just this textured cardstock in the background because it helped to just let this beautiful pattern paper pop, don't you think? And in the end, I guess it didn't really matter that there wasn't that space between there because my oval covered it up. So it worked out either way. I sure hope I was able to provide you with some inspiration today. Until next time, thank you so much for sticking around to the end. As always, have a beautiful, safe, and creative day. Bye.